weekly breakdown of every NASCAR Cup Series race. Here are your hosts, Kevin Batstone, NASCARSky, and Jeff Davis.
Welcome back, race fans, to another episode of Mash the Gas podcast. We are here to break down the 67th annual Daytona 500. What an action-packed weekend it was. My name is Kevin Batstone. Joining me shortly, Miss NASCARSky, and joining me now, Mr. Jeff Davis. Who mashed the gas the hardest this weekend, brother?
Well, Kevin, it was a long race, as Sky knows, because she was actually there, but William Byron mashed the gas, man. His second consecutive Daytona 500 win and his 14th career win. He only led 10 laps, but it's the last one that counts, as we know. And it was an awesome action-packed race. You know, what do you think, Sky? You were actually there.
It definitely was a very long race, but it definitely could have been a lot crazier. I'm glad it wasn't quite ARCA level. But yeah, I had a really nasty wreck with Preece. I mean, that was pretty crazy. But overall, I mean, the wreck at the end, I mean, when hasn't the Daytona 500 in the last few years ended under yellow? Like, it's kind of crazy.
Checkers and wreckers once again. We were kind of talking about this a little bit, Sky, with the way that the caution flag flew there with that final wreck, with obviously Byron, regardless if it was at the time of caution or coming back to the start-finish line. You know, we saw it in the duels with Austin Cindric. They looked at it at the time of caution. Eric Jones thought he wins the duel, ends up going to Austin Cindric. NASCAR doesn't throw the yellow right away on the back straightaway with this final lap wreck, which ultimately impacted those guys' position. So, Jeff, I know we were spitballing a little bit. We might have disagreed, but I just want to see a clear line of when the yellow is thrown. Is the field frozen, or are we racing back to the checkered flag?
You know, I really think it comes down to NASCAR wanting the viewership and more people to be, you know, this is action packed. We had to wait 8.5 hours to see the finish of this race. You know, normally I think they would have thrown the flag a little bit quicker, but, you know, like Denny Hamlin was complaining a little bit, and I get his point, because if they would have called the caution as it happened, then he probably would have finished around a P10 instead of around P20ish or whatever he finished. So that kind of affects him in points. But as far as, you know, having to wait that long to see the finish of the race, I think people wanted to see that go all the way to the checkered flag. So it's kind of tough on NASCAR's part with the viewership and wanting to make sure we keep everything going well. And then as a driver, I see the aspect on there too. So that's kind of about how I feel on it.
I totally agree. I feel like ultimately, though, I don't really care one way or another. I want it to just be consistent. I want the same call every time. I don't want to guesstimate. I don't want it to be this controversial thing. I think NASCAR really needs to set a ground and be like, okay, you know, here's the type of wreck. You know, if someone's on fire or something, obviously that's 100%. I feel like should be a caution every time. You want to get to that person as soon as possible. But if it's just a little carnage here and there, I don't know. I feel like they got to really sit down and be like, okay, this is what's going to be a caution. This is what's not going to be a caution.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I just want to see a clear line drawn in the sand, because we go, again, going back to the duels Thursday night, Eric Jones sitting there on the start finish line thinking he won the race, which if you look at the slow-mo cam at the start finish line, he did. But NASCAR goes, well, wait a second. We got to go back to the time of caution. We're 100 feet from the checkered flag, but we're going to back it up to when Austin Cindric had a nose. I'm fine with that call too, but I just want to see it consistent. And, you know, again, we have cars wrecking on the back straightaway. 5 cars are wrecked. You know, Denny Hamlin's in the carnage. The 24 and the 45 sneak by to finish 1-2. Help Jimmy Johnson too. Oh, by the way, number 84 there, get his top 3 of the Daytona 500. But I just want to see, are we doing it at the time of caution, or are we racing back to the checkered flag? Because we saw 2 different results this weekend.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting to see that happen. I mean, I was really stoked for Jimmy Johnson. You know, to have his best career win with Legacy is pretty damn cool. But, you know, as we know, when it comes to these plate racing tracks, it's a matter of surviving. As we know, you know, like Kyle Larson said, it's kind of a crapshoot. I mean, we do usually see the cream rise to the top. Usually we've got really good drivers that do finish, you know, for the checkered flag. But it's a matter of surviving. So it was cool to see Jimmy up there. I was really stoked out for him. It was, you know, nice to see him with a big old smile on his face. And I know, you know, with Rick Hendrick, you know, he was still happy for him as well. And I know he flew back during the rain delay. But you know, the thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit more of that wreck with Ryan Preece. I mean, that was an incredible wreck to see him kind of like riding a wheelie. I have never seen anything like that in my entire life watching NASCAR, where, you know, you get up in the air just a little bit and it looked like he was riding on his back 2 wheels, popping a wheelie for seconds, like almost a quarter way down the track before he actually flipped up and around. And I think a lot of that has to do with the body of the bottom of the car and the diffuser. And then also we had a lot of really gusty winds, as I'm sure Sky can attest to. I think we were seeing like 40-mile gusts off and on. So it was pretty crazy.
There was a lot of variables there for sure. I mean, look, Ryan Preece, as we know, has now had incredible impacts at super speedway style racing. We saw the flip at Daytona, and you heard it from the horse's mouth. I mean, Preece said himself, this was worse. And it wasn't so much the flip. I think the flip is more of that, that's what gets people's jaws to drop. That's that, that shock and awe factor of, look, a car is up in the air. But what actually hurt is when the car came back down and landed back on its wheels, that blast right through your back. We saw it in Kansas. Eric Amarola broke a vertebrae. Denny Hamlin's attested to how much impact. Kevin Harvick was talking about it. We saw Elio Castroneves take a hit like that in the duels where it just radiates through your body. So, the flip was the flip, but when the car landed back on all four wheels, that impact's pretty intense. And you could hear it in Preece's voice. He goes, man, if we don't do something different here, someone's not going to be walking away from this. And look, we know how far NASCAR safety has come. We've seen what has happened at Daytona over the years. I think we have great race cars, but there's something that we need to do to keep these cars on the ground for sure. Denny Hamlin's talking about taking some drag out of it. Will that help? I'm not sure. Sky, you were boots on the ground. What was your take on it?
I 100% understand where Preece is coming from, but I definitely think there's stuff that needs to be done. There's stuff that needs to be reworked, but it's also like when you're driving a car at 200 miles an hour, not quite 200, but getting really high up there. I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like it's just physics. Like there's only so much you can do to prevent it. But I understand 100%. Like I don't want to see that for him. I mean, he made a good point. He's like, I have a 2-year-old daughter, it's going to drive a lot of people from the sport if we keep up that way. And that wreck, it definitely was just so, I don't know. It was unexpected. It was horrible. I felt really bad for him. I mean, all the wrecks tonight, there was a lot of good cars that ended pretty early. I mean, we had that really, really early wreck. I remember my dad's a big Ross fan, and Ross went out that really early on, like lap 30 or something. I mean, I know it's just a product of super speedway racing, and honestly, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm kind of over it. And the Daytona 500 doesn't feel as special as it did anymore. It's very much luck. It's very much just in. There is no rhyme or reason to it, honestly. It doesn't matter how good you are. I mean, Team Penske was good all day, and ultimately they weren't even in the top 5 at the end. So it just sucks to see, honestly.
I agree 100%. I know, Jeff, you and I were disagreeing a little bit about this when we looked at some of the winners over the last few years at Daytona. It really does come down to survival, and you're kind of taking the sport out of it with super speedway style racing. Now, when we get to Atlanta next week, yeah, it's a similar product, different racetrack. You just different style all around. But for the most prestigious race of the year to just be a complete wreck fest, survival of the fittest, Scott, you mentioned Team Penske dominated the race. I mean, the 22 goes in. They think it's an ECU failure. They swap out the throttle body. He comes blasting back through the field. 22 is the best car in the field, no question, even though the fastest lap did go to Michael McDowell, and he will get that championship point. He ran 199.251 miles an hour, so that's that new rule for the fastest lap championship point. But no question the 22 is going to win this race. So now we got to get into the battle here with the 47. Jeff, your thoughts?
Well, I was going to say, I think Penske obviously dominated the entire race. We had 200 laps, and 125 laps were led by Penske. So, you can't say that they weren't dominating. But, Sky's right. It's like, speedway racing and pack racing like this, to your true NASCAR fan, you got to think, it's kind of a shit show in a way. It's like, okay, people like to see the carnage. They like to see the excitement. They like to see the wrecks. But, we have a lot of good winners in the last Daytona 500 winners. It's a matter of survival. But, like Kevin and I were talking about a little bit earlier, in the last, since 2004, you've got like Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Kevin Harvick, Matt Kenseth, Dale Jr., Kurt Busch, a lot of really good drivers out there. So not too many. Even Austin Cindric hit it in 2022. So really good drivers that are actually winning the race, but it's a matter of surviving it. And, I saw a t-shirt that Kyle Busch had on a couple days before the race that said, we're coming up to the most expensive day of the year. Actually, his t-shirt said, this is the most expensive race or the most expensive day of the year. And I had to laugh about it because it is true. How much money is actually spent on these cars? I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of money and costs these owners a ton of cash. Luckily, I guess, the Daytona 500 has the highest purse. It is, the Super Bowl of our sport. I think the purse this year was like $33 million split between all the drivers, and your average race only has about 5 million for the most part. So, it's going to be interesting to see how they adjust things. But yeah, as far as the pack racing, I'm not into it. I want to see them, back 2x2, get them back on some cookie cutters and some short track racing where we're actually doing some passing and get back to real racing.
Yeah, I'm just really over the super speedway, and I feel like it's definitely catered to the Rex and the appeal of maybe not the casual fan, not a diehard fan. But back to the 22 and 47, you know, I seen somebody say like, "Oh, I understand it was the last 15 laps of the race, but you don't have to make that move." And that's where I start to get confused because I'm like, this is the Daytona 500. Aren't we supposed to make those moves? Like, I understand if it was early on, but I don't really like to place blame because, they're moving so quick, happens in a split second, and I don't like to put too much fault on the drivers, but I really don't think it was Joey's fault ultimately. I mean, Kyle Busch even said that he was trying to push a hole that wasn't there, but the hole clearly was there. There was three lines. Stenhouse, you can see Joey lift. He had the flames coming out his pipes at the side there, but he can only do so much when the entire rest of the line behind him is full speed pushing. Two, three cars behind. They don't know what's going on. They can't see. And people kind of don't understand that. They're like, oh, it's Joey's fault, but Stenhouse probably shouldn't have came down the way he did. He kind of got in a pickle when, as soon as he kind of came down the block, he couldn't go back up because I think it was the 42, if I'm correct, was up there. At the end of the day, it's one of those racing deals. It's just how I feel. It's that super speedway pack. I mean, you can only do so much when everybody's three wide and there's, zero passing lanes. So it just is a product of that type of racing. And I'm not going to fault really either driver because, I mean, every driver out there, they want to win and they're going to do what they can.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I mean, it's easy. It really depends on what camp you're in, right? If you're a Logano fan, you're going to point the finger at the 47 and vice versa. Jeff Gordon made comments saying that it was, a bonehead move by Joey, and obviously Kyle Busch put the blame on Joey. But these were guys that got tore up race cars. Kyle Larson was affected. The 8 got wrecked and then wasn't able to get back out into the race. Look, I mean, it's two cars going for the same piece of real estate. Like we said, it's Daytona 500, 15 to go. It's time to go. It's time to make these moves. And yeah, I think that Ricky, he was getting aggressive. We know. I mean, he's Wrecky Spinhouse. That's his nickname. He's going to make some bonehead moves. Joey had the fastest car. He did lift, so it's hard to say who's at fault here. I'm just going to call it a wash and say it was a stalemate. I think it was a 50-50 on both of them. It was a racing incident. This is what happens. Cars get wrecked, as Jeff just said, most expensive day of the year. And you're going 195 miles an hour down the back straightaway. That's a split second decision. Was it a spotter? Did a spotter say, hey, come down, come down? I mean, it's hard to really point the finger at who's at fault here. It's just a racing accident. Again, super speedway racing.
Yeah, it's really tough because, like you said, not enough real estate. Joey, I think, was really aggressive. And like Clint Boyer said, I kind of agree with him a little bit. Joey just got a little bit greedy. And I think it was because he was doing so damn good through the entire race. He really did have the best car the entire night, obviously. He got really lucky on that last caution, which put him back on the lead lap. But to see him come from where he did in the back, coming all the way up, I understand the aggression there. But it's just tough, like you said, when you're going three wide at 198 miles an hour, it's tough to make those calls. So was it a spotter error where, the 47 spotter said, hey, you're clear. I don't know if he did, or he was just trying to squeeze him down a little bit. Joey was obviously punching through it, but, as these drivers do, this is what you got to do to win. And even if they're teammates, I mean, let's look at, stage 2, at the end of stage 2, when Ryan Blaney won the stage, he, Austin Cindric in the 2 car was in the lead and he got right up on him. He gave him a really good push. He pushed him so hard on purpose that it put him out way further. And then he let him out to dry a little bit so that it would slow him down. And, even though they're teammates, they want those points. They want that win. So Ryan Blaney purposely pushed him out there so he could let him dry out. And then he wound up passing him and he got the stage win. So, it's all for yourself when it comes down to these race car drivers, whether you're teammates or not. You do work together for a certain amount of time, but then when it comes down to it, it's all for one. That's it. You know what I mean?
Well, there's definitely, you're going to have not team orders, but you're going to have, team alliances, and you're going to treat your teammates differently. We obviously see the Fords pit with the Fords and the Toyotas and so forth. First time we've seen a Toyota sit on the pole in a Daytona 500. We had, look, 4 out of the top 5 were Toyotas, so they ended up making out pretty good in this deal. We talked about Jimmy Johnson, Chase Briscoe, our pole sitter, finished 4th. John Hunter Nemechek getting a 5th place, so decent there for Legacy Motorsport. But yeah, I mean, again, it's just super speedway racing. These are the things that happen. I mean, we see guys saving gas. We heard this early in the race, 50% throttle mid-pack. Guys out front are 100% throttle. That's just kind of the yin and yang of it. Is it going to be green flag? Are we going to get a caution? When are we going to pit? There's so many things that go into it that when it comes down to that final run, and guys are getting wild and we're getting 3 wide and we're wrecking. Look, it's just a product of this next gen super speedway package. And look, I kind of agree with Denny Hamlin. I think you need to pull a little bit of drag out of these cars, put the horsepower where it needs to be and let these guys make their own runs and not rely on a push, right? And have to play the strategic chess game of, as you said, Jeff. I mean, and kudos to Blaney for timing that out right and learning. And Brad Keselowski does a great job at it as well. But how do we make the product better? It depends on who you ask, right? I mean, some people loved it. Like Sky, you said, the casual fan, they're going to look at that and go, man, that was exciting. For us diehard fans, we want hard racing. And that's why I think we're all excited to get past Atlanta, start getting to tracks like Phoenix and Vegas and really see where this 2025 field stacks up.
So yeah, kind of on that point, as far as, looking at this race, we had 56 different lead changes. That's amazing for a 200 lap race, even though there were only 15 leaders because they count it at the checkered line. There were 56 lead changes. So there was so much back and forth between this entire race. I mean, guys were going from the back all the way to the front and coming back down. Now, regardless whether it was due to cautions or just being in the right lane, whether you're on top or bottom, because a lot of times, as we know, you get in the middle and sometimes you get hung out to dry and you just fall back all the way to the back. So it's really tough when we're doing this pack racing on these super speedways.
I definitely agree. I'm ready to get past these super speedways, these Atlantas, these Daytonas. I'm ready to get some real racing in because it is very hard to determine, like you said, how the field is off these super speedways because, Corey LaJoie was up front leading for a while. I know he's not full time this year, but that just tells you everything you need to know about super speedways. It's not very reliable. And I want to see, I was interested. It was very interesting for me to see Kyle Larson in the back. I thought he would have been more of a factor. So I'm interested to see how he goes for the rest of the year. I'm worried that, he took last year to heart and I don't want to see him leave the sport because, he's upset of the way the kind of like the playoffs and everything are going. But I'm interested to see him. He's really good at like Phoenix and those type of tracks. So hopefully he can do good. But yeah, we'll see. I'm excited to get the rest of the season underway. I'm very happy that we got NASCAR back.
Yeah, I think we can all agree with that. It's great to have racing back. It was a wild weekend. You mentioned the ARCA race. Old Cletus McFarland ran it. It's probably one of the greatest NASCAR interviews I've ever seen. Energy was great with the duels. We had the trucks, Xfinity, just a lot of action all weekend. And yeah, there it is. We kick off the weekend the season with our prestigious Super Bowl, so to speak. The clash is over. We get to the Daytona 500. We have President Trump there. It's a, very patriotic thing. There's a lot of energy. And then it's interesting to see the fall off with viewership and how it goes from here. Jeff and I were kind of talking, Fox is going to carry this thing a little bit, but now it's going to change, right? So like practice and qualifying is going to be carried over on the Prime side. We're going to see some FS1 worked in. We're going to see Prime covering it. So I'll be interested to see how the viewership goes with NASCAR this year now that we've gotten this wreck fest out of the way. We have another one coming this weekend in Atlanta, of course. But I think, Jeff, as you and I both know, once we get to Phoenix and we get to Vegas and we start to get back to the meat and potatoes of the sport, you can't sit here and say, that Tyler Reddick or, really any of these guys that finish in the top 5 are the favorites just yet. Jimmy Johnson. I mean, we know he's running a part-time schedule. Is Legacy Motor Club there? Like, this is not a good judge of where everyone's stacking up. Sure, we know the 24 William Byron Hendrick Motorsports is going to win a lot of races, but Byron goes back-to-back Daytona 500s. Incredible. Give credit when credit's due, right? That's great for HMS and to add to their prestigious portfolio. But we got to get through Atlanta, which is probably going to be another shit show, probably another 3 wide deal that someone will win. And then we can kind of see where we're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like we were talking about, you see a lot of these guys in there that normally aren't. I mean, Jimmy Johnson, as we know, 7-time champion, one of the greatest of all time, if not one of the best ever in NASCAR. It's tough to say, he's such a damn good driver, but, since he's been gone for a while and, retired and only running a couple races, to see him come in P3, it was interesting to see because, I was really stoked for Jimmy and it was really cool. Yeah, I'm really excited to get back to the regular race. Like some of my favorite parts, though, were some of the things we saw during the rain delay. I don't know if you guys saw that tweet that Kevin Harvick put out with Clint Boyer taking a nap in the back room. That one
Yeah.
cracked me up. That was awesome. So I just loved it. But you know, this race itself, again, it's the great American race. You know, and we love it. You know, it doesn't matter what party you like or not, whether Trump's there or not. To see the Air Force, you know, the Thunderbirds do like what 5 flyovers. Sky, you were there. They kept rotating and rotating. And it's like we're all Americans. We all love it. It's racing. I think overall it was an exciting race. It was great to watch. Atlanta's going to be interesting next week. But I think it was just overall a really entertaining race. It just kind of sucked that it took 8.5 hours to get it done, especially for like Sky, where she was there with her dad. It was his birthday, you know, y'all were having a great time. But that's really hard to endure when you're at a track for like over 12 hours. I mean, Kevin, you and I have both done it. You know, Sky just did it. And it's tough when you have those rain delays because it takes about an hour and a half or so to even get the track dry once we're done. You know, once it's done raining, it still takes quite a while to get the ball rolling again.
It was definitely a long wait, but I'm just glad that we got the race in last night because I didn't want to have to choose another outfit. I thought my outfit yesterday was pretty good. And I was like, I don't know if I can live up to it for a second day.
It looked good. I saw it. It was great. And you're up on the Jumbotron, I saw too.
Yeah, we saw you get up on the Jumbotron. That's cool.
Oh yeah, I put that picture up there. I forced it up there.
You're like, I'm making this happen. Yeah, I mean, look, Daytona, I'm ready to turn the page. The last thing I'll say about Daytona before we move on to Atlanta and kind of where we're headed is we got to address this ridiculous provisional rule that allowed Elio Castroneves to even be in this race. Fortunately, Martin Truex Jr. and Jimmy Johnson did qualify in, right? They made it on speed, so they were locked in. But had they not, and had they have had to race their way in the duels and they wrecked out, like Hilo Castroneves did, they would not be in this prestigious Daytona 500. This rule needs to be corrected immediately. It makes no sense to me why you have a 7-time champion, 84 Cup Series winner, not locked in. A Cup Series champion, Martin Truex Jr., not locked in. Hilo Castroneves has never even taken a lap in this next-gen car, and he's locked in.
I am 100% with you on that rule. I think it's very I understand what NASCAR wants from it. I just don't think that it's going to get the results that they're looking for. You know, they want to bring eyes to the sport, but I just don't know, especially with the shape of NASCAR right now and everything that's going on. I don't know if we could really hold new eyes at the moment. There's a lot of work that needs to be done overall. I don't know. I don't like that rule, and I don't like the Kyle Larson rule that they put in either, where you lose all your points if you can't. Like I understand that too, but to me it just seems like you're trying to push out. So you're saying other drivers in our sport can't go to other sports. You'll lose your playoff points, but if you're another driver for another sport, sure, you can come right on over and maybe qualify in over drivers like you said, Jimmy Johnson, Martin Truex Jr., all these drivers that probably, I mean, they've put their work in. Both of them arguably have put their work in, and they definitely deserved it. I'm happy that they at least made it in on speed.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, you know what? These guys are great. And whether you're great or from another sport, you got to qualify. And if you qualify, you're in. So, Elio, I think it was great to see him in there. He wasn't eligible for any, payout or points or anything like that. But I mean, it was cool to see him in there. But I agree. It's like, you know what? Guys like Jimmy Johnson, I'm glad he made it in. I'm glad Martin Truex. It sucks that Truex got kind of, knocked out kind of early. But race your way in. You got to earn it, and that's the way it's got to be. So I think that you're right. NASCAR does need to say, hey, you win, or you qualify and you're in. If you want 41 spots in there, put 41 spots in there. Don't say, okay, if he makes it in, there's only 40, but if you don't, there's 41 and he gets in. It's just not fair to the rest of the drivers, because I mean, I think we had like 45 different drivers trying to qualify for this. So what, four drivers had to go home no matter what, or 5 if he would have made it in.
Exactly. I think JJ Yaley, a couple others did not make the field based on position in the duels. So I just want to see the rule tweaked a little bit and make it more, let's award our champions of the sport. We used to call it a champions provisional. The Daytona 500, you could get in if you had won a race before, won a 500 before, champions provisional. We used to really honor that. And again, it would probably carry more weight had Jimmy Johnson not have made it, had Martin Truex Jr. not qualified in. It'd be obviously more aggressively looked at under a microscope. But I'm all for these drivers coming in, but you got to get in the way that the rest of our field gets in. I'd like to see them tweak that a little bit going forward. Bring the F1 guys in, bring the Indy guys in. I'm all for it, but they just have to transfer in the right way. So I think we can see some improvement on that rule for sure going forward.
I 100% agree. On to Atlanta. I'm super excited. I don't know. I feel like the same contenders that we've seen this week are probably the same contenders we're going to see next week. The only issue, like we brought up before, is that it doesn't matter how good you are. It almost is like if you are good and you are running up front, you're almost probably not going to win the race. That's how it feels anymore. So I'm sure we'll see Team Penske up front running a lot. I'm really proud of Cindric, not to go too mushy in my Penske heart here, but I mean, he's really the last 2 years. I mean, he's really grown and he's becoming a really well-rounded driver. I'm excited to see him this season, but there's others like Todd Gilliland. I mean, he was really good last year. I like to see what he can do, and all these new drivers. I'm excited for Atlanta. I feel like it's going to be another random again. It's hard to choose who you think's going to win anymore. It's too random.
It really is. And Jeff, you and I will agree on this as we did tie in fantasy yesterday. When you make your fantasy picks once again this weekend, you got to be mindful of not wasting uses on a potential great driver that's going to get you points down the road, on a super speedway situation, right? And so we'll get another good look at it. We're obviously headed to a mile and a half, but it's super speedway style racing with a very, very interesting pit road entry. I understand why they do it because of the speeds we carry off turn 4, but the fact that if we have to pit under green, we have to come in really at the entrance of turn 3 and run that all the way down pit road. I've never really enjoyed that about Atlanta. I haven't really enjoyed super speedway Atlanta. I'd like to see us go back to the old Atlanta. That's just my personal take on it, but it's going to give us another look, of where we're at with speed, right? Single car speed. Is the Penske Fords going to pace the field again? Is that a possibility? Are we going to see another Toyota run great with single car speed? Again, I look at guys like Bubba Wallace. I mean, he great super speedway racer. I think 23XI has brought a lot of speed. I'm curious to see what old Riley Herbst and some of these guys are going to do this weekend, Jeff.
Hey, what do you think about 23XI? They've got 4 drivers from 4 different countries, that ran the race this weekend. I thought that was pretty damn cool.
Oh, you're talking Trackhouse?
Or with Trackhouse, yeah. Oh, and then with Pitbull ducking out this year, what's up with that? I wonder what happened with that situation.
Yeah, I'm not sure why Pitbull relinquished his ownership in that, but it was cool to see Trackhouse represent 4 different countries in the Daytona 500, same team.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. And I wish I could know about the Pitbull stuff too. The way he announced his departure, the timing and everything, it seems so weird. It almost seems like, I mean, I don't want to speculate too much, but it almost seems like he was very unhappy and left. I don't think this was a planned thing, overall. It makes you wonder, wish you were a fly on the wall.
Yeah, and there might be some more that comes out, out of the rumorville and down the pipeline on that. But, to find out about that at the Daytona 500 weekend, that Pitbull is no longer involved, with Trackhouse, it's just interesting, and we'll see what happens with all that. But I think, Trackhouse, again, those guys, Ross Chastain, Daniel Suarez, I mean, I think it's a well-rounded team. They're getting their legs under them. Same with 23XI, coming into another season with more data. We obviously know about the charter lawsuit situation that's been going on and has been a talking point. So hopefully, we can get more of that ironed out as we continue on through this year. But I really do think that the 23 of Bubba Wallace is going to be a threat this weekend. We've really seen him become a great super speedway racer. So he's definitely on my radar. Can Daniel Suarez defend, his 3-wide finish? Obviously we look back at Atlanta in the fall race in the playoffs where, Mr. Joey Logano, of course, took that win. Daniel Suarez went runner-up. Ryan Blaney, Christopher Bell, Alex Bowman rounded out our top 5. So, basically just close your eyes and then make your picks at random would be my advice, Jeff.
Well, the thing I think that's different about Atlanta is I don't think we're going to see 56 different lead changes. I think this time since it's such a shorter track, it's a mile less. We're going to be seeing, you need to be up front and you got to stay up front. If you get wrecked, yeah, you're going to wreck a lot of guys behind you, but we're not going to see, like I said, 56 different lead changes. It's just not going to happen. So I do think Atlanta will be a little bit different, but again, it's about saving those picks. So the guys that, hey, we only get 10 picks in fantasy if you're playing fantasy, folks. So do you want your driver running in a pack race where it's like, what, it takes one guy to screw up and then it takes out 8 cars. And that could be one of them, like Sky mentioned with Ross Chastain. He got bumped out really early. I had him in my lineup. I thought he was going to do pretty damn good, and I think he'd do really good throughout the year. But I didn't know he's going to get knocked out so early. So it's just a matter of where you were. I mean, again, with, here at Daytona, we saw a lot of back and forth all the way from front to back, front to back. Almost every driver. I mean, hell, I didn't think Corey LaJoie would lead a lap, and he did, and he, by the way, he put up his own money, to get into this race. He's like, he spent his kid's college fund, and luckily he had a couple sponsors jump in and bail him out, but he actually had the balls to actually put up his money, his retirement money, just to get into this race. And I think part of that was because the purse is so big at Daytona. So, we'll see how Corey LaJoie does, since he's going part-time this year. But I am excited to go, see Atlanta, see what happens next week, and, see if Daniel Suarez or Ryan Blaney can pull it off again.
I'm right there with you. I definitely, if you were doing fantasy, I would definitely choose probably someone a little more unsuspecting, probably like a Todd Gilliland or like a Riley Herbst, something like that. So you're not wasting a full-blown pick. But those drivers, I mean, Cole Custer, they're drivers that they can be in contention at the end. I mean, they're probably not going to run up front all day, but I mean, all you got to do is be around for the last lap. It doesn't matter where you're at all day. But I mean, I have a good feeling about maybe someone from front row winning Atlanta. Maybe that's someone that I would probably put my pick on. I mean, maybe even Tom Gilliland. I mean, he's pretty good at these plate tracks, the super speedway type tracks.
I think those are solid picks for sure. I mean, I'm gonna go with Kyle Busch again. I think Kyle Busch is out for blood now. Obviously RCR, he's a couple of years under his belt there. We saw what happened. He's gonna have to try it again for his 21st shot at Daytona. But he was in that 3-wide battle. Daniel Suarez, of course, is definitely going to be in my lineup for sure. And I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of storylines that we're going to have to cover too. I mean, Xfinity, right? We saw what happened with Parker Kligerman having to now challenge that with Corey Heim getting the win. So a lot to come this week on that, Jeff. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Hey, one just quick thing before we sign off. I did want to give props to Junior Motorsports. First time in the Cup Series. Justin Allgaier gets a P9 in the top 10. So we're going to see what happens in the future down there with Junior Motorsports, trying to get a partner and get a full cup race all year long.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see Junior Motorsports progress over these years. Super stoked for Kelly Earnhardt and Dale Jr. It was so cool to see those guys out there make the show, the emotions, just incredible. So I'm stoked for those guys, and hopefully they can go out and get another championship on the Xfinity side. They've got the guys to do it. They got a great team, and I'd love to see them go full-time Cup. So we are just about out of time. Sky, before we sign off, tell the folks where they can follow you.
You can find me anywhere you get social media at NASCARSky. I've been doing some Twitch streaming. So I've been doing some iRacing on there and just kind of talking NASCAR. I'm not too good at doing the talking and the racing at the same time. So I'll get there eventually. But yeah, you can always catch me over there.
And follow us, of course, Mash the Gas Podcast across the board, all social media platforms. We will be back next week to break down the M Better Health 400 from the Atlanta Motor Speedway. And Jeff, until then,
Mash the Gas.